I believe that most people desire to be more prosperous, but you don't become more prosperous by desiring to be more prosperous. We become more prosperous by being more productive. And our prosperity is always going to be the result of the relationship that we have in our lives to the levels of productivity that we operate on. What if I told you that God is so vested in our success that in the very first chapter in the Bible, he put so many success principles, productivity principles, prosperity principles, whatever you want to call them, in Genesis chapter 1, that it's almost like he gave us a wink and said, if you don't get to chapter 2, you're going to be all right. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at Genesis chapter 1, starting with verse 1, and we're going to go down to chapter 2, verse 3, because that's where actually the Creator Week begins and ends in the book of Genesis. And I'm going to highlight, so even before I get into it, just by way of introduction, I'm going to highlight some principles that are not going to be in the principles that I'm going to give you, but I think they're essential for us to be reminded of. And some of this stuff is going to be stuff you've heard me say before, but the reality is most of it isn't. So let's start with Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. So Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, before I even say that, can y'all tell I'm jacked? I'm really amped about this. So I'm doing my best to calm down. Okay. So I'm going to share with you some things about the different principles, and just understand, the more we understand, utilize, and undertake these, what I call God sciences, the better our life will work. Are y'all tracking? So I'm just going to remind you. I'm going to give you a couple reminders first, then we're going to dive right into where we're headed. So I'm going to go over here to my trusty digital blackboard, and we're going to look at Genesis chapter 1, verse. First of all, let's just look at the first word in Genesis. The very first word in Genesis in Hebrew is the word Breshit. So Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, in English has 10 words, in Hebrew has 7 words. Breshit bara Elohim et hashemayim va et haaretz. I got it backwards. So it's Genesis. In Hebrew it has 10, in English it has 7. So in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, the first word is Breshit. Now, Hebrew words are not just spelled, they are built. So if I write on the board, I want everybody to shout out to me, what did I just write on the board? Tell me what it is. Water. Did I write W-A-T-E-R? No, I wrote H2O. I showed you the components. And when I showed you the components, H2O, you automatically knew I was talking about water. Well, every biblical Hebrew word is not just a spelling, it is the construction of the concept. That's why the Hebrew rabbis teach you that if you understand the Hebrew language, you understand how life works. Are y'all tracking? So it's like Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Daled, Hey. So the first letter in the Hebrew language is the letter Aleph. And the letter Aleph, it means first. It's also the number 1. Echad is also number 1, but the letter Aleph also represents the number 1. So there are 22 Hebrew letters. You can count to 400. Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Daled, Hey. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 200, 300, 400. Okay, I'm talking fast right now. I'm going to slow down, I promise. I'm talking fast right now to get to the point. And besides, this is stuff we've already covered before. Okay, but if you look at the letter Aleph, this is the letter that represents God. Why? Because God is first. Everything came from him, so he was first. He had to be first. But not only is it the letter that represents God, it's the beginning of the letter Elohim. It's the beginning of the word Elohim. It's the beginning of the word Emmanuel, like Emmanuel, God with us. So it's so powerful. El Shaddai begins with an Aleph. And so when you look at an Aleph, though, it's made of 2 other Hebrew letters. It's made of 2 yods and a vav. Well, a yod is a hand. A vav is a nail. The letter that represents God is made of 2 hands and a nail. So that's what I mean. We don't have time to do all of this, but we're going to look at the first word, which is the word Breshit. So if you look at the word Breshit, Beit Resh Aleph, Shin, Yod, Tav. So that's the first word in the Hebrew Bible. and we say in the beginning, but that just means in beginning, because bait, the letter bait means in. I mean, it represents how, but it means in, right? And then Rashit is beginning. So in beginning. So if you take these letters and parse them separately, because there are no vowels in Hebrew, they're just consonants, and then you have accents under them. So if you take Beit Resh spells the word bar. There are two words in Hebrew for the word bar. There's ben. There are two words in the Hebrew for the word son. There's the word ben, and there's the word bar. Okay, so both of those mean son. And you've already seen these words as you've read the Bible, but you never really took note of it. You knew the word bar meant son, even if you didn't, because Simon is called who? Simon Bar Jonas, right? So which means Simon, son of Jonas, right? Blind Bar Timaeus, which means what? Blind son of Timaeus. Oh, when they were getting ready to, when they tried Jesus and they were going to let one prisoner go, they didn't release Jesus even though he was innocent. They released the guilty man whose name was what? Barabbas, which means son of the Father. Okay, are y'all tracking? And so Breshit means son, but this letter represents, we already talked about, represents who? God. So now we see the Son of God. This letter means destruction. It means teeth. Destruction represents fire, but destruction. So the Son of God is destroyed. Yod is a hand with his hand, and the Tav is represents a cross or a covenant. So on a cross for our covenant. That's the very first word in Genesis chapter 1. This is what I mean. There's so much in Genesis chapter 1. One of the things that all of us would do, and I know I talk fast, right? But I don't talk as fast as you read the Bible. And I've said often before, we need to stop treating the Bible like an interstate and start treating it like a school zone. Slow down so some learning can take place. See, we're in such a hurry to get through the Bible. There's nothing wrong with getting through the Bible, but we're in such a hurry to get through the Bible that we don't let the Bible get through to us. And so that's why I said this morning, I'm just going to take 2 hours. I'm going to cover 25 Gen 1. What's Gen 1? Genesis chapter 1, productivity hacks for 2025. Now, there's more than 25. But I'm going to give y'all at least 25 of them this morning. That's why I started an hour early, so I could get all of my introductory stuff out of the way. So when I'm talking, you won't be looking at me like a calf looking at a Newgate. What's he talking about? Okay. So just to understand that in the book of Genesis, in the first chapter, there are so many success principles. So isn't it beautiful that the very first word in the Bible, God shows us his plan for our redemption? In the first word. And it gets more better. But wait, there's more. So what about the fact when we see the first verse in the Bible, God established the laws of physics in the first verse in the Bible? What do you mean he established the laws of physics? In the beginning, that's time. I'm moving this over here. God created the heavens, that's space, and the earth, that's matter. That's one verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It's like God just, there's physics for you. Go study it for the rest of your life. These are the boundaries that control our experience of life. Everything that we do while we are alive, we do inside the boundaries of time, space, and matter. Now this is what I like to call this the platform. So this is the platform that we all must operate on. And so the better we understand the platform, the better we're able to move within this platform, right? Now, I find it really fascinating that when I say God is, you would say what? Love, or God is good, and then somebody say all the time, right? And we can say God is omnipotent, God is omniscient, God is omnipresent, God is holy, God is just, God is love. There's so many descriptions to describe God. But how many of you would agree when you meet somebody and you tell them something about yourself, that may not be the most important thing about you, but it's the most important thing you want them to know about you when you meet them? Yes. Does that make sense? Well, isn't it fascinating that even though all those things I just named about God are true, none of those things are the first thing that God told us about God? It didn't say in the beginning God loved the world, but though he loves the world, that's not what he said. He didn't say in the beginning God is holy. It didn't even say in the beginning God is good. It said in the beginning God created. Which tells us what about God? That he is creative. And so the fact that God is creative seems to me, and I might be wrong about this, it just seems like that may be one of the most important things he desires us to know about him. The first thing God told us about God is that he's creative, which is fascinating when you read Genesis chapter 1 verse slow, because, when you read the whole Genesis chapter 1 slowly, you see that God created all kinds of stuff and when he created creation, the sun, the moon, the stars, the grass, the trees, et cetera, et cetera. He created the water, all that, creation. Some might call it the universe. Some would call the universe God, but they're confused. Like the universe is no more God than a Tesla Model S is Elon Musk. Okay, one is the creation, the other is the creator. Okay, y'all track it. So, when God created creation, he said, let there be. Let there be light. Let there be a firmament in the heavens and let it divide the waters from the waters. God said, let there be. When God created creatures, that was the second category, so he created creation. He created creation. The next thing he created was creatures, right? And when God created creatures, he didn't say, let there be creatures. He said, let the earth bring forth. And then he named the land animals. He said, let the waters bring forth the fish and the fowl. Why? And we'll get to what that looks like as a success principle later. But when God created man, I want you to notice that he didn't say, let there be man. And I want you to notice he didn't say, let the earth bring forth man. That's how I know the earth is not my mama. And he didn't say, let the waters bring forth man. He said, let us make man in our image. This is one of those things we got to slow down to comprehend. This is very important for you to understand you. So you cannot fully understand who you are and why you are and what you should be doing unless you first understand who God is and who you are based on who he says you are. That's it's impossible to do it otherwise. And so, why is it so important that when God created man that he said, let us make man in our image? Because the first thing that God wanted you to know about God is that he's creative, and the first thing he wanted you to know about you is that he created you in his image, which means he created you to create stuff and he made you to make stuff. So you are being most like God when you are creating something. When you're using your imagination and your communication and your unification and your implementation to create something. Now, the difference between how God creates and how man creates is this. God creates out of nothing. We create out of something. Now, in a sense, we kind of create out of nothing, but not like absolute nothing. We don't create from absolute nothing. God created everything out of absolute nothing. God created absolutely everything out of absolutely nothing. Now, we don't create out of absolutely nothing because we have to learn things, and then we'll come up with an idea and we'll say, well, I wonder what would happen if I put this with this, and I put those two things together, and I could make this. And so we take things that we've learned about, which means those things that we learned about already existed, and then we take our learnings and we combine those learnings and we create something that's never existed before. Are y'all tracking? So we're more like God. We're like, man. I remember when I came home in elementary school, I was probably in the third or fourth grade, probably fourth or fifth grade. And my mom said, what'd you learn in school today, baby? I said, I learned that man is a higher form of animal. She said, don't you ever say that again. I mean, she was like hot. You're not an animal. You're made in the image of God. I'm like, yes, ma'am, but you asked me what I learned, right? And I didn't understand then why she was so bent out of shape about that. But the reason she was so bent out of shape is because there's a very big difference between a man or a woman. A man, when I say man, I'm talking about Adam man, not Ish man. Adam means human man. Ish means male man, not the male man that delivers your mail, but male as opposed to female. Okay, just want to make sure I understand what I'm talking about. Okay, so the word for an animal is bahema. What is bahema? I put that on the wrong side, man. So dyslexic. Bahema. What's bahema? Bahema means literally, in it is what it is. So an animal means like a domesticated animal, in it is what it is. What does that mean? A horse is a horse is a horse. Of course, some of y'all are old enough to know what that means, or to remember that show, right? Like what it's telling us, what the name for an animal is telling us is that an animal can only do in 2025 what an animal could do the first day an animal was created. Dogs can only do what dogs could do the first day dogs got here. Cats can only do what cats could do the first day cats. Same thing with whales and horses and zebras and giraffes. Like they can only do what they could do the first day they got here. But see, God didn't make man as in it is what it is. God made man as Adam, and God made man to Adameh. Now, what does that mean? So the word for Adam is Aleph, Dalid, Mem. Which is, see, I just got all excited about that. But anyway, do you remember, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So the heavens and the earth are totally different categories. And I was reading a book, I read a book called The Meaning of Creation. I think that's the name of it, The Meaning of Creation. And one of the things the authors talked about is the fact that heaven gives earth meaning, and earth gives heaven expression, right? So heaven gives earth meaning, earth gives heaven expression. Well, animals are just bahema. It is what it is. Animals are not spiritual creations. They're just physical. They have a spirit, as in breath, but they're not spiritual. They're like physical. But a human is an Aleph Dalid Mem. Aleph represents God. The word Dalid Mem spells blood. And we know that the life of the what? Flesh is in the blood. So we know that a man is a godlike creature with flesh and blood. Are y'all tracking with me? Yes. Okay, I told you I was going to slow down, didn't I? Okay, so why is that important? Because the word Adam, if you put the accent, what they do when, and I'm not trying to give you all a Hebrew lesson, I promise, but just understand there's so much more to the Bible than just the stuff that's on the surface. So what they do, because they don't have vowels, is they put different accents under, the verses that tell you how to accent them. So if I go like this, that would say ah, or I'm going to do I'm going to do one of these. So this looks like a T, but it makes this letter go ah, like father, right? And then if I do dome, add dome, I leave that there, and then I do this, and then instead of it being Adom, it'd be Adameh. And Adameh means in Hebrew, I will compare myself, or I will become like, which shows us that part of the purpose of being a human being is to make this part of us more like this part of us by letting this part of us be in control, be the leader, and this part is the servant. Is this like this is, okay, right, exactly, because there's so much design in what God did. In the beginning, like in 7 days, he designed all of this stuff with the words of his mouth. It gives me, I'm literally the hair standing up on my arms as I'm thinking about this stuff. Because he's showing us how life works in the very first chapter. Hey, okay, I get it. You don't like to read. Read chapter 1. Okay, I'm going to go back to where I was, the platform. So when God made man, the first thing he tells us about man is that he created man in his image. But the first thing he says to man, God talks to man for the first time. Well, I want you to notice, first of all, when God talked to man for the first time, that God talked to man. Why is that important? Because if you want to be more like God, stop ignoring people while you're so focused on stuff. We walk past people and we don't even acknowledge them. We're so caught up in our own little world of what's missing in our lives That we don't even acknowledge another human being who's made in the image of God. And you wonder why you're struggling, but you're struggling because God said it's not good for man to be alone. But the reason you're feeling so alone is because you leave other people alone and everything reproduces after its own kind. Before God even spoke to man, you know what it says? It says, and God blessed them. Do you know what the word blessed means? It means saluted. And I know this sounds weird, but it means bowed down to. Not that God was worshiping man, but God was bestowing honor on man because man is a representation of God. We're an extension of God. But we don't even acknowledge other human beings. We just ignore them. We act like saying good morning is a chore. And it's not. It's a blessing to be able to greet another human being who's made in the image of God. It's a blessing. I can salute somebody. I can say, I hope you're having a wonderful day. How are you today? How are you today? You're not a bear. God gave you words. How do we say to our little children? Use your words, honey. Use your words. Okay. So the first thing that God said to man when he talked to him is be fruitful and multiply. Now, the verb on fruitfulness is stated. The verb on multiply is implied. Because be fruitful, we know that he's not saying be fruitful and be multiply and be replenish the earth and be subdue it. None of that makes any sense. The implied verb for multiply, replenish, subdue is what? Do. So God says, first thing God says to man is be fruitful. What does fruitful mean? Fruitful means produce on the outside based on what I put on the inside of you. What did God put on the inside of all of us? God put the seed of an aspect of his creativity inside of all of us so that we can produce on the outside stuff that represents the God who planted an aspect of his creativity on the inside of us. So that's why it says, let your light so shine before men so that they can see your good works, and glorify your Father, which is in heaven. Why are they glorifying your Father, which is in heaven, when they see your good works? Because they know that good work didn't come from you, but it came from something that God planted inside of you. It's the fruit of what? The Spirit, which is love, joy, peace, long-suffering. Do you see how it's all fitting together? And God just keeps saying the same thing in different ways. So hopefully one of these days, we get it. It's hot in here. So just wanted to make that as an observation. So God said, be fruitful. What does fruitful mean? It means produce on the outside based on what God put on the inside. Do multiply. What does multiply mean? It means to increase, which means we were not created for stagnation. We were created for multiplication. Increase. Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth. You know what replenish means? It means fill up the earth. What am I going to fill up the earth with? The stuff that I'm multiplying. By the way, this is the very first thing out of God's mouth to a human. This is the first command thousands of years before the 10 Commandments. Be fruitful. Produce on the outside based on what God put on the inside. Multiply. Increase. Replenish the earth. Fill it up. And subdue it. Do subdue it. What's subdue mean? It means to trample down. Trample. Why am I trampling? Because disruption always follows intention. And as soon as you decide to do something good, the first thing that shows up is something opposing good. If you don't believe me, go read Genesis chapter 1, and verse 1 and verse 2. Verse 1 says, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. What does verse 2 say? And the earth was, that word was is not used to be, it's became, without form and void and darkness upon the face of the earth. Disruption even followed God's intention. I'm going to show you why in a minute. Because God could have created everything and left the disruption part out. But then we wouldn't have a pattern. I'll get more on that later. Be fruitful, do multiply, do replenish the earth, do subdue it, and then have dominion. Oh, this is so good. So these are the parameters. These are the parameters. These are the parameters for how we do life. How do we live a progressively productive life? By be, do, have. Here's the problem. Be a little, do a little. Do a little, have a little. Be a lot, do a lot. Do a lot, have a lot. Don't be, can't do. Can't do, can't have. You know why most people are frustrated? Because they desire to have and they're unwilling to do. And they totally resist becoming more than they've always been. Because they think good enough is good enough. But I'm better than I was. Yeah, but you're not as good as you're going to be if you just keep on going, baby. So these are the parameters. God said, be, do, have. Now here's what's really interesting. Each one of these parameters matches a different part of the platform. What does that mean? That means the reason time exists is for the purpose of becoming. Anything that any of us are going to become that we are not right now, it's going to take time. And see, the reason we feel frustrated and irritated is we desire to control something that we have no control over, which is time. I should be further by now. You don't know where you should be by now. What if Joseph had thought he should be further by now? I'm sure there wasn't, like when Joseph's brothers threw him in a pit, I'm sure he would have rather been somewhere else. Hashtag just saying. But if he wouldn't have been thrown in a pit while his brothers went and figured out what they were going to do with him, while they figured out they were going to sell him, and by the time they got back, somebody had already beat him to the punch. They took these foreigners come by and take this kid out of a pit, and then they take him down to Egypt and sell him to Potiphar. And now he's a slave in Potiphar's house. But wait, Lord, I thought you told me I was going to be the one. And my brothers and my mom and my daddy, they all going to bow down to me. I thought you told me I was going to be the one. Yeah, but you're only going to be the one when it's time for you to be the one. And you don't get to determine the time. Because everything's not beautiful in your time. Everything's beautiful in his time. That's why I don't set goals. Because a goal is what? A dream with a deadline, right? But I don't know the deadline. I don't know the times and the seasons of what God is doing in my life. So my only objective should be to be as much as I can be and to do as much as I can do and let this plus this equal this. You're frustrated because you think you should be further along. You don't know where you're supposed to be. I don't know where I'm supposed to be. Here's what I know I'm supposed to. Here's who I know I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be a faithful witness. Here's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to do the work that I was created to do. I'm supposed to be progressively productive. Are y'all tracking? And so the purpose of time exists for the purpose of being. Joseph got thrown in prison for a crime he didn't commit. That's so bad. Is it bad? Or was it necessary because the prison is the only place where the butler would have met him to tell Pharaoh he could interpret dreams when Pharaoh had a dream that nobody could interpret? See, we think only the mountaintops are ordained for our journey, for the fulfillment of our purpose. But the valleys and the pits and the Potiphar's houses and the prisons are also ordained for our purpose. And if you get delivered from any one of those too soon, you will not be in the right place at the perfect time, which is God's time, which is always beautiful. Amen. Even when it feels bad, it's still beautiful. Yeah. You remember what Joseph said? Hey, butler, don't forget now. When you are restored, like I told you you'd be restored, don't forget about me. Tell Pharaoh I'm in here wrongfully. Oh, man, I could never forget you. As soon as he gets restored, he's like, Joseph who? Joe, I don't know. I know a James. I know a John. I don't know no Joe. And he forgot. Why did he forget? Because if he wouldn't have forgotten, he would have told Pharaoh about Joseph too soon. Do you realize sometimes success can come too soon? And the only reason you care about when it happens so much is because you want to have. You're so obsessed with having, you don't want the process of being in the pit and Potiphar's house and the prison to make you the person you need to be so you can do the stuff you need to do so that when you have the stuff, you get to this space, you're strong enough to stay there when you get there. See, all of us, I don't care who you are, you got to go through some stuff to get to your stuff. You know what I'm glad about? I'm glad I don't have to rush today. we all up in the weeds right now. By the way, this is all introduction. Now, what's amazing is God didn't just give us the platform and the parameters, but he also gave us a process. Really? You know what? Before I give you the process, I want to give you one more thing. Let me give you what these three things on these three platforms turn into, these pieces. Being speaks to my identity. I promise you, almost every challenge you have in your life and every frustration is because you don't know who you are based on whose you are. You're getting your identity from somewhere other than the ultimate identity, which is the I am that I am. I was so confused. I was a teenager. I'm reading the Bible, and God speaks to Moses out of this burning bush, and he says, you march into Pharaoh's office, and you tell him I said, let my people go. Pharaoh's the most mighty king on earth. Moses says, he asked God a question that I thought was ridiculous, but I'm a child. What do I know? I'm 16, 17, 18 years old. Moses said, who shall I say has sent me? I'm like, dude, what kind of question is that? Who shall I say has sent me? Bro, this is what I would have asked. What can I tell Pharaoh you said you gonna do if he say no? That's what I'd ask, right? But Moses knew he could. That's a waste of words. Moses said, who shall I say has sent you? Why? When does a private have more authority than a major in the military? When? When he's on orders from a general. Why? Because all authority is an identity issue. And see, when you're on orders from the ultimate headquarters, then you will be like the apostles who said, we cannot but speak the things which we have seen and heard. They are listening. The voice I'm listening to is so far above your little squeaky voice, I can't even hear what you're talking about. Identity, everything in your life pours out of your identity, who you think you are. Oh, well, who you think you are might actually be your identity or your my-identity. Because most people are not operating in their identity. Most people are operating in their lie-identity. And they're resisting their lie-identity, so they never tap into their identity. You say, Myron, what's a lie-identity? The lie-identity is all the things, all the people in your life told you all your life you are not. You're not smart enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not good enough at math, you're not musical enough, you're not talented enough, you're not athletic enough, you're not thin enough, you're not fat enough, you're not tall enough, you're not dark enough, you're not light enough, you're not man enough, you're not woman enough, blah, 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 blah. And we're so zoned into what all the people told us we were not our whole lives that we can't even recognize who we are. We're so familiar with who we aren't, we can't even tell who we are. Am I telling the truth? And so what we do to overcome our lie identity is we make up a my-identity. What's that? It's another fake identity that we create so that people don't think we aren't who people told us we aren't, but we don't realize we're still not who we are. We are only who God says we are and no one else. So anything else is a waste of energy. That's why. Because God said so. Notice, what did James say? Not James. What did John say in 1 John, I think it's chapter 2? How can you love God how can you say you love God whom you haven't seen if you hate your brother whom you have seen? What did Jesus say? You saw me hungry and you didn't feed me. You saw me thirsty, you didn't give me drink. You saw me naked, you didn't clothe me. You knew I was sick, you didn't minister to me. And I was in prison, and you knew I was in prison and you didn't visit me. They said, when did we see all these things? He said, inasmuch as you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it also unto me. In other words, Jesus was saying how you treat people that you perceive you don't need is actually how you treat me. I told you I was going to go slower, didn't I? What? He said, Lord, who shall I say has sent me? He said, tell him that the I am that I am has sent thee. Do you know that made less sense to me than the question? I'm like, what's that? And I read that, I'm like, what's that going to do? Like, what kind of, like, if I'd have been Moses, I'd say, Lord, I don't want to overstep my boundaries, but what does that mean? Because that meant, I read that, I was like, what? Is anybody else, when we're like, what is this conversation about? Right? Well, who was it that put the moon and the sun in the heavens and decked the heavens with the stars? God is saying, I am that I am. Who was it that smoothed out a chaotic earth and scooped out a place with his hand, put the water in it, tied it down with a rope of sand and called it oceans? God is saying, I am that I am. Who was it that put a garment of green over the valleys and the mountains and the hills and buttoned it up with lilies and garlands and wove it with laughing daffodils? God is saying, I am that I am. And when we realize who God is, then and only then can we understand who we are. We have to get our true identity from the ultimate identity, which is I am. Okay. Well, guess what happens? Our identity, being speaks to our identity, but doing speaks to our activity. Do you realize everything you do because of who you think you are or who you think you aren't? All of your activity pours out of your identity. And then guess what? The stuff we care about the most. By the way, your desire to have is God-given. God gave you a desire to have so you would have a willingness to do, but when you're attempting to do things that you don't have yet the ability to do, you would bump your head on your inability, stub your toe on your insufficiency, and you'd finally realize, I can't do this so I can have this, who I am right now, so I've got to become more than I've been being so I can do more than I've been doing, and then finally I'll have more than I've been having. See, being is the seed. Doing is the trunk. Having is the fruit of the tree. Don't you want to be more like a tree? So, have speaks to our property. The property is the reward. It's the bonus. It's the gravy. It's the icing. It ain't the mashed potatoes and it ain't the cake. Am I talking too fast? Did I slow down enough? Okay. So when we understand this, then and only then can we start living our lives the way God designed. Now watch this. Now we're about to get into it. I just want to say one more thing. Y'all have heard me talk about the 4 levels of value. Do you realize that everything you desire to have, I wasn't going to draw this, but I'm going to have to draw it just because the 4 levels of value that God put in Genesis chapter 1. I've said this before, and people say, I didn't see that in Genesis chapter 1. I know, you were on the interstate. Okay, so what are the 4 levels of value? The lowest level of value is implementation. By the way, prosperity, wealth, abundance is, I'm going to write the word wealth, even though I'm not talking about money when I say wealth. I'm talking about the abundance. Abundance of what? Everything good. Wealth is inherently spiritual. Why? Because spirit is abundant. There's more than enough spirit for everybody to have spirit, and there'll still be more spirit. Wealth is the same way. Like, politicians would have you to believe that the people who don't have because the people who have. But that's not how it actually works. You cannot create equality of outcome. It's impossible. Equality of opportunity is possible. But then we have agency and we got to do something with the opportunity that we have. And people who do more with the opportunity they have end up with more than they had before they did more with that opportunity. And they definitely end up with more than people who ignore and squander the opportunities they have or attract it. So wealth is spiritual, which means if you're going to create abundance in every area of your life, I'm not just talking about money, abundance in relationships, abundance in physical fitness, abundance in health, abundance in happiness, abundance in joy, abundance in relationships, abundance in money, all of it exists on the same plane. They are all spiritual results. But we attempt to produce the spiritual result by physical means, and we end up only frustrating ourselves and hustling and grinding and winding up more exhausted. So implementation. So the lowest level of value. This is in Genesis chapter 1 and 2. This part is in chapter 2. The rest of this, chapter 1, right? Implementation. The way we create value on the implementation level is we use our muscles over time. Muscles are a physical resource. Time is a limited resource. We're multiplying a physical resource times a limited resource, and we're attempting to have a spiritual, infinite, abundant outcome. It's impossible. You can't produce abundance by multiplying lack. Are y'all tracking? And so what we have to do is we have to elevate. See, what people do down here, the reason people struggle down here is because what they're doing is they say, okay, I'm going to implement harder. I'm going to work harder. Okay, can I tell you a little secret? You want to produce more? Stop working harder, start working higher. What do you mean work higher? Well, the next level of value is called unification. See, if you're down here, you're the person who does the thing. You're trading your time for money. You have a limited amount of time. You have a limited amount of physical capacity. So the amount of money you're going to be able to produce is going to be determined by the amount of value you're able to produce. And the amount of value you're able to produce on this level is limited. The next level is a little higher. It's unification. What is unification? Unification is level of value. On this level, we use our management skills to create wealth. So we're no longer the person who does the thing. We're not this person. What we do is we manage all of these people with our management skills. And managing people is a higher spiritual activity than doing the thing yourself. That's why managers make more than the people they manage. Even though the people that they manage are doing the majority of the physical work. Why? The more of the money you can make up here at a higher level, you're going to make more money. You're going to have more. If you operate up here, if you become unified in your beingness. So you do all this stuff. You do all this stuff because that's what somebody told you in a success book you're supposed to do, how to win friends and influence people. Nothing wrong with that book. I'm just saying you attempt to do the things that somebody else has done, and you expect to get the same result, but you get a different result, and you're like, it didn't work for me. It didn't work for you because you didn't become the person. You were ununified. So you were doing something, but you were incongruent. See, we have to be unified in ourselves as well. If my desire is over here and my belief is over here, I am out of congruence. I am out of alignment. And so I'm working against myself, and I'm exhausting myself because I'm desiring something that I don't believe I can have or don't believe I should have. And so, unification is the second level of value. Wealth begins to be created on the next level. Communication. Communication is the second highest level of value, and it's where wealth begins to be created. Well, here's the interesting thing about communication. Communication is based on language, and language is a spiritual attribute. It's something that only spiritual beings have. Animals can't talk. I mean, they have a rudimentary communication, but animals can't talk about what they talk about, and they can't think about what they think about. They can go, "Wah, wah, wah, danger, danger." Okay, cool. But that's not like, hey, what is danger? How do you spell danger? What are some synonyms to danger? They can't, animals can't do that. Do you realize we can talk about what we talk about and think about what we think about? And the only other beings that can do that are spiritual beings, which would be God, angels, and demons, and Satan. Language is spiritual. That's why we must guard against using worldly and satanic language, because when we do, we are aligning ourselves with the enemies as opposed to aligning ourselves with God. Okay, so communication, when we use our words, we are being more like God. Communication is the second highest level of value. And by the way, God is my witness. I found all of this in Genesis chapter 1. And I know you're saying, I don't remember seeing that. I'm going to show you. Pump the brakes. I'm going to show you in a minute. I want to get to the highest level of value first. By the way, these people use their management skills to make money. These people use their muscles over time to make money. On this level, you use your mouth to make money. Now, there's a caveat. 2 caveats. You ready? Caveat number 1. You must have a mouth. Check. That one's good. Okay. Number two, you must develop the ability to use your mouth skillfully. Okay, cool. So, highest level of value. What is it? Imagination. On this level, we use our mind and our money to make money. Now, why do I say mind and money? Because how you use your mind to think about money is ultimately going to determine how much money, how much wealth you create monetarily, more than the amount of money you make. I literally believe that I could work at McDonald's, I couldn't work at McDonald's because I wouldn't be able to stand the smell, but I could work at a minimum wage job somewhere and I could become a millionaire because I would use my mind to do the right things with my money that I made at McDonald's or wherever that place is, because whether or not you are rich or poor is not determined predominantly by how much money you make. Because I know people who make a lot of money and they're broke as a joke and ready to choke. But whether you're rich, poor, or middle class is determined more by what you do with the money when you get it. And what you do with it is going to be based on your philosophies and what you believe about money. See, people think, I just can't get ahead because life ain't fair. No, you can't get ahead because you think you can't get ahead. There are a whole lot of people who've come from further down than you are and have gone further ahead than you will go because you believe more in your limitations than you do in your leverage. Now, so that I can get into these 25 principles, which this is all still introduction. I got one more piece of introduction, and then we're going to get into the 25 productivity secrets. And I know that sounds funny, but I'm very serious when I say that, even though it sounds like I'm joking. I'm really not joking. How I think about money, what I think about money. Do you know why? Do you know why some people are frustrated when they read a book about how to do better and they're not doing better yet? They think the money is the pay, is the greatest pay, but the greatest pay is the person you become. By going through the activities and figuring out what works for you and what doesn't work for you, that's how you bring your life more in alignment, more in tune with the principles that work, which brings me to where is this in Genesis chapter 1? So when God created man, God said, let us make man in our image, which tells us what existed first. If God said, let's make man in our image, what existed before God said that? The image had to exist first. There's imagination. Image is the root word of the word imagination. So the image existed first. Then God said, let us make man in our image. What did he do? He communicated. But he didn't say, let me make man in my image. Did he? What did he say? Let us make man in our image. Father, Son, Holy Ghost, body, soul, and spirit. Oh, unification. Now, if you only read Genesis chapter 1 and you didn't get down to chapter 2, verse 7, you would miss the last thing that God did. By the way, God created man, God made man before God formed the body for man. So God created the man, made the man, and then he formed the body for man. And then what did he do? He breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living soul, which is why human beings are the most unique beings in the universe. Why? Because animals are bahema, and it is what it is. They are expression, but they have no comprehension of meaning. They don't know why they're doing what they're doing. They're just existing and doing their best to keep existing. Like when the lion wakes up in the morning, he's on the hunt for something. Let's call it the gazelle. When the gazelle wakes up in the morning, he's on the run from the lion. The lion is not hunting the gazelle because he has animosity towards gazelles. What's he doing? Staying alive, staying alive. Okay, sorry, I couldn't resist. So I thought it, and I really did do my best to not do that, but it slipped out. Okay, so the lion is just doing its best to survive. When the gazelle's running from the lion, he's like, I'll show this lion. I'm going to starve him and his little lion cubs to death. No, he's just preserving life. They have no idea why they're doing what they're doing. They're just doing it because that's what they are. The thing that makes a human being is because we are made in the image of God. God thinks, heretofore we think. Like, our mind is a representation of heaven on earth. Our body gives, just like heaven gives earth meaning, our mind gives our body meaning. Just like earth gives heaven expression, our body gives our mind expression. But we have both. I don't just have a body and functionality like an animal, and I don't just have a mind like a thought or an idea. You ever think about the fact that thoughts exist independent of your ability to think them? You didn't make up the thought, you just discovered it. When? I don't have time to go there. I'd like to go there. I'll do it on a different video. I don't have time to go there. That would have been a rabbit that we would not have caught today, and I only have an hour and 6 minutes or so left. Okay, so now, one last piece of introduction, and then I'm done. As I've said before, the Bible is not a book of religion. It contains religion, but it's not a book of religion, right? It's not like the Quran. It's not like the New Translation of Holy Scriptures. It's not like the Book of Mormon. The Bible is not a book of religion. It contains religion, but it's not about religion. The Bible is a book of principles, promises, and patterns, etc., etc., etc. So if you've never thought about this like this before, think about it like this now. You ready? Principles are God's automation. So what do I mean when I say automation? God established principles so that those principles would always do what he always intended them to do without him having to make them do it each time. The law of gravity. I drop these glasses, they fall. Why do they fall? They fall because I dropped them and gravity pulled them down, right? So gravity is a principle. So every time somebody drops something, God doesn't have to say, you fall, you fall, you fall, you fall, you fall. You can imagine that'd be like, it's kind of like, right? So God said, I'll just program this into the way things work. Principles are God's automation. Principles like what? Principles like the law of energy, the law of energy conservation. What does that state? Everything is energy. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It just changes form. That's a principle. What is that? God's automation. The law of entropy. What's the law of entropy? Anything left to itself tends to move more and more towards disorder. Now, what's fascinating to me is energy and entropy are opposing forces. And all principles have an opposing force. Now, I don't know if you ever thought about this, but why do all principles have an opposing force? Because the principle requires an opposing force in order for that principle to have meaning. Like, in the words of Jim Rohn, we couldn't fly without gravity, or you couldn't create lift if you didn't have gravity. You couldn't create thrust if you didn't have drag. You couldn't have momentum if there was no inertia. Why? Because principles need to have something to push against. The challenge of, Jim Rohn said, life is the struggle to keep death at a respectable distance. And so, as we're working to keep death at a respectable distance, that is a struggle. That struggle is the thing that creates strength in our beingness. That's oftentimes why the better our lives get financially, the worse our lives get physically. Why? Because we do things with our money to make our lives easier, and when our lives get easier, we minimize the struggle, and when we minimize the struggle, we reduce the strength. Anyway, so principles are God's automation. And so, but promises, what are promises? Principles are God's automation, but promises are God's reputation. Because promises are based on truth. And what is truth? In Hebrew, truth is amet. What is amet? Amet is aleph mem tav. This word amet doesn't just spell truth, it tells us the nature of truth. Why? Because this is the first letter, this is the middle letter, this is the last letter, which tells us we can't understand the truth about anything unless we look at the beginning, the middle, and the end. One of the reasons we find ourselves so frustrated is because we look at a small sliver of something and we become irritated by that small sliver because we're not looking at it in context. By the way, the word for falsehood in Hebrew is the word sheker, which is shin, kof, resh. Now, that doesn't seem like any big deal, but what does that tell us? Well, what this tells us is, even though this is the first, middle, and last letter, these are three letters that are right beside each other in the Hebrew alphabet. But in the word sheker, they're out of order. Kof, resh, shin, lamed, mem, nun, samach, ayin, pei, fe, kof, resh, shin. Kof, resh, shin. So kof, resh, shin is the order, but in the word sheker, it's shin, kof, resh. Why is that important? Because what is a falsehood? A falsehood is a small selection of something taken out of order. Are y'all tracking? But wait, there's more. The scripture says about truth when you're like, let's say Max and Deborah get in an argument and they come before the judges. What the judges will do is they'll ask questions and they'll ask for witnesses. The scripture says, how should everything be established in the Old Testament? By the what? Mouth of what? 2 or 3 witnesses. There's 3 letters in each of these words. In the word amet, each one of these letters stands on 2 legs. There's 2 legs, there's 2 legs, there's 2 legs. But each one of these letters stands on 1 leg. They're a false witness. That the word amet is, this is the letter 1, this is the letter 40, this is the letter 400 in Hebrew. If you add 400 plus 40, that's what? 440 plus 1 is what? 441. This is the letter for 100. This is the letter for 200. This is the letter for 300. 200 plus 100 is what? 300 plus 400. 300 plus 300 is 600. So the number for falsehood is 600. But the number for truth is 4. It's 441. 4 plus 4 is 8. 8 plus 1 is 9. 6 plus 0 is 6 plus 0 is 6. What is a 6? An upside down 9. What is a lie? An upside down truth. All I'm showing, I could go into more detail about that, but I don't want to. So, just because I didn't get to the 25 principles yet. This is the introduction. What did Bishop Malcolm say? He said, Bishop Wayne Malcolm said, I'd never preach a long sermon. It's my introductions that take all the time. Well, y'all know that's true today because we've been on introduction now for over an hour. Okay, so we have principles are God's automation. Promises are God's reputation. By the way, I forgot to tell you the main part I wrote this up here for. This letter represents God. Mem tav is the word death. Met is the word death. What does that mean? That means if you separate God from the truth, all you have left is death. Do you realize there were no public school shootings when the 10 Commandments were hanging on the wall that said, thou shalt not murder? But not only that, that's bigger than that. God refers to himself as the God who cannot lie. Not does not lie, not will not lie, cannot lie. God put a restriction on his infinite ability, and he said, I cannot lie. Why? Because of the word amet. If God himself doesn't keep his word, then God has to die. And if God dies, everything ceases to exist. So, principles are God's automation. Promises are God's reputation. And then patterns. What are patterns? Patterns are God's application. And so one of the things that we would all do ourselves a great service to do as we're going through life is to study principles, study promises, and study biblical patterns. If we study biblical principles, study biblical promises, and study biblical patterns, and we operate based on those, our lives can't do anything but get better. So the more we understand, utilize, and undertake these God sciences, the better our lives will be. Okay, now, introduction complete. Genesis chapter 1, productivity hacks for 2025. 25, Genesis 1, productivity hacks for 2025. Now, there are actually 37 that I found. There are probably more than 37. But I found 37 in Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 31, and chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. Now, here's what's fascinating. I'm going to read for you Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and Genesis chapter 1, verse 31. I'm going to read the first and last verse of Genesis chapter 1. You ready? Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Okay? Verse 31. This is the last verse in Genesis chapter 1. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good, and the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Now, if God was only interested in us knowing that he created the heavens and the earth, those two verses could have been the entire chapter. If all he wanted us to know is that he created everything, those two verses could have been the entire chapter. But he used 29 more verses to tell us what he did each day. Now, I don't know about your mind, but my mind says, well, why in the world would God do that? Does that seem like a valid question? And I believe the reason is because God didn't just want us to know what he did, but because we're made in his image, and the first thing he tells about himself is that he's creative. And the first thing he tells us about us is that he made us in his image, which means he created us to create stuff and he made us to make stuff. God put those other 29 verses in Genesis chapter 1 so we could see how he created it. So when we get ready to create something, we can just follow the pattern, God's application. So this is so good. Okay, so what are these principles? I can go through kind of faster than I went through all of that because I'm just going to show you that they're there and then you can go home and study them on your own, right? Okay, so the first productivity hack for 2025 is in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So it starts with verse 1, intention. It's interesting that the first law of energy, or the first law of thermodynamics, is the law of energy conservation. That's interesting. Why? Because everything is energy. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It just changes form. Why is it fascinating? Because if that's the first law, and the first thing that we see is intention, we see, based on intention and based on verse 2 and the fact that we understand that every principle has an opposing force, if there is an intention, there's got to be some kind of disruption, right? And so the second verse says, I'm not done with the first verse, but I got to tell you the second verse so I can finish teaching you the first thing about the first verse. The second verse says, and the earth was without form and void and darkness upon the face of the deep. The word was is not the word used to be. The word was is the word became. So when we see the word, you can use a Strong's Concordance to look this up. You can tell, like, I don't want you to believe anything I say. Go look it up. So when it says, and the earth was without form and void, it literally means the earth became without form and void and darkness upon the face of the deep. Okay? Why is that important? Because the second law of energy is entropy. Anything left to itself tends to move more and more towards disorder. So if we're going to be more productive in 2022, here's what we have to do. We have to make sure that all of the most important things in our lives have a predetermined set intention. Why? Because in order for progression to happen, intention is necessary. If anything in my life, anything, relationships, finances, health, whatever, anything in my life, learning, whatever, anything in my life is going to get better, intention is required. Now here's the kind of scary part. In the absence of intention, or even in the presence of intention, disruption is always present. So you have energy on one side, but you have entropy on the other side. So here's what's fascinating. Doing worse requires zero intention. You don't have to try to do worse to do worse. All you have to do is not intend to do better. In order for your life to get better, it requires intention. In order for your life to get worse, it only requires neglect. So, don't you find it fascinating? You have to make yourself smell good. You don't have to make yourself stink. All you got to do is leave yourself alone. Huh? Can I get a witness? Right? You don't have to make yourself dirty. You just have to not make yourself clean. You don't have to make yourself weak. Entropy shows up in the body. When you don't use the body, it shows up as what? Atrophy. You don't have to make yourself weaker. You go break your leg. I dare you. Okay. Go break your leg and get a cast on it. I promise you, when your cast comes out of that leg, I used to talk, now I just read about it. When your leg comes out of that cast, the leg that was in the cast is going to be smaller than the leg that wasn't in the cast because you were using the leg that wasn't in the cast and you weren't using the leg that was in the cast. Progression requires intention. Digression only requires neglect. This is in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Why? Because he intended to do that. That was his intention. His intention was to create the heaven and the earth. So guess what? So that's the first thing we see in verse 1. We see intention. What's the second one? So that's principle number 1. Principle number 2, what is it? Well, the second principle in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 is initiation. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. You know what our problem is? We will set an intention, but we don't have any initiation. We'll set an intention, and instead of following intention with initiation, we follow intention with procrastination. God didn't just have an intention, he did something about his intention. What did he do? He began. He beginned. He started. Guess what? One of your biggest problems is you don't have enough initiative. You don't start. You don't get started. You spend most of your time getting ready to get ready, preparing to prepare, and by the time you get to the station, the train has already left. That's just verse 1. I said 25. Whoa, I said 20. I looked up and these progressive glasses got all wonky. I'm like, whoa. Okay, So Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, we see intention and we see initiation. Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, and the earth was without form and void and darkness upon the face of the deep. We see that disruption always follows intention. Now here's what happens. Even in grown folks, it blows my mind. Grown folks will decide to do something good, something hard shows up and they act surprised. Like, did you just you're like 38. You're shocked that it didn't just go gangbusters because you said, this is what I'm going to do. Are you messing with me right now? Disruption always follows intention. It doesn't matter what you do. You can say, I'm going to get in shape. Okay, good luck. Right? Because when you say, I'm going to get in shape and you start working out, the first question you ask yourself when you decide to get back in shape or to get in shape is, what in the world was I thinking when I decided to do this? Temporary insanity, Your Honor. Why? Because when you start working out and you haven't worked out in a long time, you feel worse far before you feel better. Now, for those of you gym heads who love just going to the gym and all that, you love working out and you feel great, right? But that ain't how you felt when you first got started. Right? You got to grow into that. Okay, all this hard stuff feels good. I wish I had. Okay, y'all. So disruption always follows intention. Now, when I'm reading this and I'm seeing in the Bible that even for God, disruption followed intention. God's creating everything. And then disruption follows God's intention. Why? Is that a good question? Maybe, I don't know. It seems like it. Because God is not just telling us what he did, but he's showing us how he did it. And if he didn't have disruption follow his intention, when disruption followed our intention, we wouldn't have a pattern from God to know that what we should do next. How do you make it through the disruption that follows your intention? Why does disruption have to follow intention? Because the disruption that follows your intention is the thing that makes you strong enough to stay there when you get there. So you see, disruption follows intention. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void. So what does disruption look like? It looks like deformity. It was deformed. Deformity, right? So the earth was without form, deformed, and void. Oh, it was devoid. And darkness upon the face of the deep. What if you just took an hour and said, what does deformity look like in the experiences in my life? What's broken? What's not in alignment? What's deformed? What if you, okay, what's missing in my life? Who do I have to become to replace what's missing? Darkness. What does darkness represent? Confusion, fear, angst. Disruption always follows intention. Why? Because if disruption didn't follow intention, when you get there, you would be like Saul. And you would fall and lose the kingdom forever, like Saul. Why? Because Saul got anointed, and the next day he was king. David got anointed, and guess what he did? He spent years running from Saul, who put a contract on his life. Why? Because David was going to be the one whose throne was established forever. And in order for his throne to be established forever, he had to go through something to get to something in order to be strong enough to stay there when he got there. Stop cursing your curses. The worst things that ever happened to you in your life are going to be the best things that ever happened to you in your life, and I can prove it. Why? How can I prove it? The worst thing that's ever happened in the history of the world is also the best thing that's ever happened in the history of the world. What's the worst thing that's ever happened in the world? The greatest injustice. They're not treating me right because I'm a man. They're not treating me right because I'm a woman. They're not treating me right because I'm black. They're not treating me right because I'm Hispanic. Blah, 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 blah. Stop it. Don't you understand that that curse is your blessing? That difficulty is your elevation. It's your elevator. It's your escalator. How do I know? Because the worst thing that's ever happened, the greatest injustice in the history of the world is that he who is holiness died on a cross with sinners, for sinners, as sin in your place and my place. That's the worst thing that's ever happened in the history of the world. Guess what else it is? The greatest thing that's ever happened in the history of the world. How great was it? It's so great that the scripture says that if the princes of darkness knew what they were doing, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. See, when they crucified the Lord of glory, they bruised his heel. But when they bruised his heel, he crushed their head. So you want everything to be smooth. Why? Because you don't understand life and how it works. How many of y'all picking up what I'm putting down? And so, disruption always follows intention. That's verse 2. But what else in verse 2? It says, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. What does that show us? After disruption follows your intention, you must find a source of inspiration. The Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Verse 2. But that doesn't just show us that in verse 2. And moved upon the face of the waters, verse 2 and 3. It says, it also shows us the importance of oxygenation and hydration. Like breathing. I'm amazed that when I cold plunge, when I submerge my 180 pounds of flesh in crazy cold water every morning, and it resists, like I know I'm going to do it, my mind gets excited, my body gets resistant. No matter how many times I do it. And what do I have to do so I don't feel the pain? What I do when I go get a vitamin IV and they're getting ready to stick that needle in my arm, I go, but I do it through my nose. I'm just doing that for theatrical effect. I fill my blood with oxygen. Why? Because oxygen is a natural anesthetic. That's why I teach people when you're cold plunging, do the box breathing. Why? You're oxygenating your blood. And you focus on the breath. The Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Water is so essential. You know, if somebody did the 75 hard, you got to drink a gallon of water every day for 75 days. Why? Because we should all be drinking half our body weight in ounces of water every day to be hydrated. Okay, so isn't it interesting that all this is in here and water? Okay, who knew? Verse number 3 again, and God said, let there be light. So we see, and God saw the light. God said, let there be light, and there was light. So here's 3 more. Communication. God said, let there be light. Do you realize how you talk about a thing determines how you perceive that thing? What you proclaim about a thing, your proclamation about a situation determines your cognition, what you think about that situation, your perception of that situation. That's why when people say, it's such a bad day, it's a bad day, or are you just focused on the difficult things in your day? It's really a bad day. It's just a bad day. It's so cold. We in Florida, we're so funny. It gets down to 50 degrees, man. We got on snow cabins and Uggs. I mean, we act like it's cold, right? Oh, it's so cold out here. Is it so cold out here, or are you just cold? I know y'all are cold. That's not the point. Y'all missed the entire point. Y'all are cold, I'm hot. I get it. It's neither cold nor hot in here. It's just our experience makes it so. I got it. Okay. So communication. If you want to live better, start talking better. But it's not, in verse 3, we don't just see communication. We see communication, but we also see illumination. See, God said, let there be light. Light, what is light? Light's illumination. What's illumination? Illumination is a metaphor for learning. Not that God's learning something, but when I find myself groping in the deformity and the devoidness and the darkness of disruption, I need to go learn something that I didn't know before I stumbled into this area. And when I learn something that I didn't know, it sheds light on how I can get out of this place where disruption followed my intention. But what we do, instead of learning how to get out of it, we just wallow in it and see if we can recruit some people to feel bad for us while we're in it. I heard somebody say one time, he said, hey, it ain't a sin for a bird to land on your head. It's just a sin for him to build a nest up there. Why? He ain't got no business being there that long. Okay, I'm down to? Oh, illumination, that's number 8. Yeah, intention number 1, initiation number 2, disruption number 3. Inspiration number 4, oxygenation number 5, hydration number 6, communication number 7, illumination number 8. Verse 3, and God saw the light. Oh, reflection. Do you realize we are so busy doing the next thing that we don't even reflect on the last thing that we did well? We're so busy getting ready to do the next thing. We just forget to bask in the fact, okay, at least I got this done. Like, enjoy where you are. Don't just pursue where you're going. Enjoy the journey. I was listening to somebody, and I don't even remember who it was. I think it was Arthur Brooks, I think, but I'm not sure. But he said something that I started thinking about Abraham. And so I started thinking about what God said to Abraham. Okay, he said, get away from your country and from your kindred and from your father's house and go to a land that I will show you. You know what I thought of this morning I never thought about before? God didn't call Abraham to a destination. He called him to a journey. See, we think the promised land is the destination. But the person we become on our way to the place is the mission. Okay, so reflection. Take time to reflect. Take time to reflect on where you are, where you've been, and just reflect on it. Let that reflection bring you a level of joy, whatever that level of joy is. And then it says, and God saw the light. That was number 9, reflection. Number 10 is recognition. And God saw that it was good. Do you realize a lot of times what we'll do is we'll have this thing called fake humility. We'll pretend that we're not something that we are, and sometimes we do it because we're fishing for compliments. That's such a nice outfit. Oh, this old thing, which means, say it again. What? Come on now. Huh? We peering too deep into that human nature, ain't we? Huh? And we think that when somebody's acknowledging an experience in their life, if they're acknowledging something positive, we assume they're flexing. Why? Because if we were doing it, that's why we'd be doing it. Maybe they're just recognizing the goodness of God on their life. We have to, one of the things that we would serve ourselves and humanity well by doing is if we stop doing so much motive attribution. What is motive attribution? I'm attributing a motive to a person when I see them do something, because that would be my motive if I did it. Like even somebody, like you do something on social media, create a video, whatever, somebody calls you a name. You automatically think that person is evil. Well, maybe they're evil. Or maybe and the possibility is that they're evil. There are some evil people out there. Okay, got it. But what if you, instead of saying they did that because they're evil, what if you gave them the benefit of the doubt? What if you said maybe they're doing that because they had a distasteful experience in the past and they're attempting to guard themselves from it in the future and attempting to protect other people at the same time? And you just gave the benefit of doubt. Guess what happens? You don't have to wallow in their mud puddle. I was talking to my friend Kenny Grant the other day. He's like, Myron, when you wrestle with a pig, I said, the pig don't get dirty. He said, yeah. I said, the pig don't get clean. He said, yeah, and the pig don't mind being dirty. So when somebody comes at you, let them play in that mud puddle. Y'all tracking? You know what? But I got to defend myself. Really? Is that what Jesus did? Peter cut off a joker's ear trying to cut off his head. Jesus put the ear back on and said, man, put that sword down, boy. He didn't say it like that. He didn't say it. But I was emphasizing, Jesus did not say it like that. Okay? There is that. Okay. But he did say a lot of times, how long shall I suffer you? How long do I have to put up with you? When are you going to get it? He said it to the disciples all the time. They that live by the sword will die by the sword. Trust God, and the guardian angel is assigned to you to take care of protecting you. Okay, anyway, another conversation for a different day. So, recognition. Okay, now let's get down to verse 4. I'm going to read verse 4. Ready? Verse 4. It's hard to believe. We're only on verse 4. Okay, and God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. Okay, that's number 11 is distinction. The reason we have different words for different things is because those different words have different meaning. So God separated the light from the darkness. Why? Because light is distinctly light and darkness is distinctly dark. This is so good. And we're going to make it. We're going to actually get through all 25. Why? Because the introduction took all the time. Okay. But that's verse 4. Verse 4 is recognition, and verse 4 is distinction. Verse 4 is also separation. He separated the light from the darkness. So in verse 4, we have recognition, distinction, and separation. Distinction means there's two different things. Separation means one's over here, the other one's over there. Y'all tracking? Okay. Which, by the way, separation is a picture of holiness. Why? Because the word sanctified doesn't mean religious. The word sanctified means set apart. It means special. It means for a unique purpose. Y'all tracking? It's like consecrated, same thing. Okay. So you have separation, and then you have prioritization in verse 5. Prioritization in verse 5. What prioritization do we see in verse 5? It says in verse 5, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. See, when you have something first, that means you have a priority. And see, one of the reasons we struggle our way through life is because we don't prioritize the most important things. We just do the most urgent things. But God only did the important thing that had to be done on day one. Prioritization in verse 5. The evening and the morning were the first day. And so what number was that, y'all? 13. So number 14, one of my favorites, the evening and the morning were the first day. Verse 5 again. Segmentation to completion. What does that mean? That means God didn't save any of day one's work for day two. He didn't rush through day one. He didn't sloth his way through day one. He just did day one's work on day one. Isn't that so cool? See, one of the reasons we struggle so much is because all of these time-saving mechanisms we have cause us to stack our activity plate too high. Y'all tracking? So I put all these things on my to-do list. I don't use to-do list either. I am such a terrible modern-day example of how to succeed. I don't set goals. I don't use to-do list. I'm not going to set a goal. And I know people disagree with me about that. They've been wrong before. They can be wrong again. It's okay. No, I'm just kidding. Like, maybe you're right, maybe I'm wrong, but this works well for me. I don't find, I should be further by now. I can't believe I don't have this yet. I have a friend of mine, Josh. We're in a mastermind together. He say, dude, I'm so mad right now. The stuff you do, your content's so good. Everybody should do it. I said, Josh, it's okay, bro. Everything is beautiful in his time. But everybody should know your content. People will find out about me when God's ready for them to find out about me, if he's ever ready for them to find out about me. And I'm so cool with it, I don't want to fool with it. I don't need to make it happen. All I need to do is become the best version of myself. I need to adameh. I need to make the daled mem, flesh and blood part of me, more like the olive part of me, and make sure the olive part of me is in control of the flesh and blood part of me. And if God wants me to be revealed, he will reveal me. And if he wants me to be concealed, he will conceal me. And either way, I'm okay. I'm not trying to make something happen, except me making sure that I'm yielded to the King. Okay. That was 14, segmentation to completion. And then, I forget what number, 14, number 15, verses 6 through 8. We're going to read verses 6 through 8. That was verse 5. 6 through 8. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made a firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. By the way, that word heaven is shamayim. Shamayim, sky waters. Okay, that's what the word heaven means. Shamayim. It's in verse 1 too. So God created the heavens. God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. See, we see this progression. Okay, day one, work day one. Day two, work. So what is division? God divided the waters which were above the heavens from the waters which were above the heavens. We're going to find out later what those two waters were called. The one above the firmament was called the heavens. The one below the firmament was called the seas. Now, there are some scientists and Bible scholars. I'm neither one. Okay, just want to make sure y'all know that. I'm just repeating what they said, so maybe it's true, maybe it's not. It seems like it could be true. So I'm going to share what they said. That when the flood happened, the scripture says the fountains of the great deep were broken up. So they believe that there was a lot of water under pressure in the core of the earth, and it erupted like a volcano. And it shot up and broke the firmament, which was some kind of force field that held the water above the earth in a canopy. So there's some kind of force field canopy above the earth that kept the waters in the sky from falling to the earth. And when it did, it broke through that firmament, and then it says the windows of heaven were open, and then the rain fell down, right? So here's what I'm just going to say. It seems like that's possible, right? And so, but God divided the waters which were above the firmament from the waters which were below the firmament, okay? So that's division, right? Everything, a place for everything, and everything in its place. Evening and the morning were second day. That's through verse 8. The next we see, I don't even remember which number I'm on. I've got to find it here. 16. Number 16, verses 1 through 9, we see collection. And verse 1 through, I'm sorry, not verse 1 through 9. Verse 9, we see collection. Verse 9, we also see manifestation. And so the next two are collection and manifestation. That's 16 and 17, right? So collection and manifestation, 16, 17, verse 9. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered. That's collection. Into what? One place. That's collection. And then what? Let the dry land do what? Appear. That's manifestation. Do you know the word manifestation, what it actually means? The word manifestation means to show up in your hand, right? And so it's the idea of using your imagination to reach through the curtain that separates the visible world from the invisible world, and going and getting an idea, and then coming back and using your physical strength to make that thing show up in your hand. That's what the word manifest actually means, to show up in your hand. You get an idea, you go act on that idea with your hands, which are your power, and then that thing shows up in your hand, right? The scripture says, let the dry land appear. God made, he separated the water, he divided the waters from, which were above, I forgot it, I read it and I forgot it. God said, let the waters under heaven be gathered together in one place. So he collected the water in one place, and then he let the dry land appear. So the water's over here and the land's over here. They're two different things. They serve two different purposes. Okay. So collection and manifestation, that's verse 9. Verse 10, we see categorization. And it says, categorization, I think it's God's, and God called the dry land earth, that's one category. And the gathering together of the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. It's interesting that we see the four elements, like 4 is the number of the earth, right? right? 4 is the number of the earth because there's 4 directions, north, south, east, and west. There's 4 seasons, winter, spring, summer, and fall. There are 4 levels of value. There are 4 levels of parenting, for 4 levels of child development. There are 4 levels of teaching for 4 levels of learning. But we see there are also 4 elements on the earth. What are they? Earth, wind, and fire. All earth, wind, and fire are all here in Genesis chapter earth, wind, water, earth, wind, water, and fire. Those are the 4. Or I said earth, wind, and fire. And the Commodores. Don't forget the Commodores. Okay, so earth, wind, water, and fire. Okay, earth, wind, water, and fire. So we see earth in this verse. In verse 2, and I think verse 2, 3, and 4, we saw fire, which God created the lights. The sun is a ball of fire. Right? The wind, the Spirit of God moved upon the face of what? The waters. So we're seeing all 4 elements in Genesis chapter. This is like, it's like if we just take our time, we can enjoy a walk through Genesis chapter 1 with God as he reveals himself to us in everything that we see. Okay, cool. We're doing really good. We might even get all 37 instead of just the 25 I thought we were going to get to. Okay, so that was 16, 17, collection and manifestation, verse 9, categorization, verse 10, God called the dry land earth, the gathering together of the waters he called seas. And then verses 11 through 13, we have 3 more. We have delegation, reproduction, and replication in verses 11 through 13. So let's go read them. Let's go read verse 11 through 13. 11 through 13. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass and herb yielding seed and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind. So God said to the earth, let the earth bring forth the grass. So God delegated the work of bringing forth the grass and the trees to the earth. So when I'm creating stuff, it makes sense for me to hire people and pay them and delegate them to do stuff. It doesn't make sense to do everything. By the way, this is one of the secrets, one of the ancient secrets of Jewish people throughout world history. They believe in specialization. You're not going to go into a Jewish community and see a Jewish person fixing their car on the weekend. Why? They'd rather pay somebody else to do it. Why? Because if you pay that person, you're blessed with the time, they're blessed with the money, and everybody wins. Okay, but we want to fix our own car, wash our own car, cut our own grass, cook our own food. We want to do all that stuff because the only reason you have somebody clean your pool is because you're too lazy. The only reason you have somebody cut your grass is because you think that makes you better. The only reason you could do that yourself and save so much money. I know. Your problem is you think the money's the most important thing. Okay. Anyway, it was a rant, but somebody needed it clearly. So 13 and 14, what did I say? Which verses? 13, 14, 15? Is that what I said? 11 through 13. So let's go back to verses 11 through 13. Here's what it says. God said, let the earth bring forth grass, and herb yielding seed, and fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so, and the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit after it, whose seed is in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the 3rd day. So we saw so much stuff happening in those couple of verses. We saw delegation. God delegated the production of the foliage to the earth. We saw reproduction. Everything reproduces after its own kind. The grass brought forth after its own kind. The fruit tree brought forth after its own kind. So that's reproduction. And then we saw, so reproduction is that they produced, but replication is everything reproduced after its own kind. In other words, we don't see apples growing on orange trees and tangerines growing on lemon trees. Everything produces after its own kind. I'm going to tell you something. The Bible tells us in Psalms chapter 1, blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is where? In the law of the Lord. In his law shall he meditate day and night, and he shall be like a tree. Now we're talking about trees in Genesis chapter 1. Fruit trees bearing fruit after his kind. And the scripture says the man's going to be like a tree. Let me ask you a question. What kind of tree are you? You can talk about what kind of tree you are, but you don't have to say anything. And you might think you're one kind of tree, but the fruit that you're producing is demonstrating that you're a different kind of tree. See, by their fruit, you will know them. And so, if indeed you are producing corrupt fruit, maybe you ought to look at your corrupt root. Because you are not going to produce the antithesis of what you are. You're going to produce a replication of what you are. And if you don't like the fruit, don't paint it. Don't paint the fruit. Change the root. Okay, I'm done ranting on that right now. Isn't this so cool that all this is in the first chapter? Like, God's like, if you don't get to chapter 2, you're going to be all right. Just do this stuff in chapter 1. Okay. Now y'all can see why I always say Genesis chapter 1 is my favorite chapter in the Bible. This is why. Okay. So we did, where were we? We got up to 21 was replication, right? Everybody's on 21? Cool. Okay. 22, observation, verses 14 and 15. Verses 14 and 15, we have 3 more. So I'm going to give you all the way to 25 in verses 14 to 15. 14 to 15, observation, designation, and progression are in 14 through 15. Chapter 1, verses 14 through 15. Now I'm going to read it to you. Here it is. Okay, 14. It says, and God said, let there be lights in the firmament of heaven, and divided the day from night, and let them be for signs and seasons and for days and for years. That's so critical. And which reminds me of something. Yeah, and I have time to say it too. Which reminds me of something. So, I believe, based on what I read in the Bible, that the curse that God placed on the earth in Genesis chapter 2 in Genesis chapter 3 was lifted in Genesis chapter 8. So people say the earth is cursed. The earth was cursed. But I believe a part of that curse, and I can prove it to you too. I'm not just making this up. A part of that curse, I believe, was the fact that we lost the designation and progression that existed in the earth before man sinned. Now, why do I think that? Because the curse on the earth says, thorns and thistles shall it bring forth, and by the sweat of your face you'll eat bread, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But do you remember what happened when Noah was born? Does anybody remember what happened when Noah was born? The prophecy on his life when he was born? His father said, this same shall comfort us with regard to the curse that the Lord hath put on the earth. And then, in fact, I'm going to go read it to you now because this is so cool, and I have time. So, because we're already at 25, so if I don't even get the rest of them, I did what I said I was going to do. Okay, so, okay. No, where is he at? Okay, Genesis chapter 5, verse 29. Here's what it says. Verse 28. And Lamech lived 182 years and begat a son. And he called his name Noah, or Noach, and Noach means rest. That's what Noah's name means. It means rest. Well, what are they resting from? Okay, let's see. Watch this. And Noach, they called his name Noach, saying, this same shall comfort us concerning the work and toil of our hands because of the ground which the Lord hath cursed. So Noah's going to do something to comfort them from the curse. That's what it says when he was born. I didn't read anything. Did I read anything into that? That's what it said, right? Okay. Now, I'm thinking, when I read that, I was like, wait, what's he talking about? What's he going to do? What's Noah going to do? Okay, that's what it says, right? And then, and Lamech lived, after he begot Noah, 590 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Lamech were 770 and 7 years, and he died. And Noah was 500 years old. And Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay. Now, that's interesting. Anyway, I don't have time to go there now. I just created more curiosity in my goofy little brain. And don't judge me. Just pray for me. So Genesis chapter 8, here's what it says. Genesis chapter 8, verse 20 through 22. Here's what it says. And Noah builded an altar. This is after the flood. This is after Noah gets off the ark. And Noah builded an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast and every clean fowl, and offered a burnt offering on the altar. A burnt offering is a picture of total sacrifice, right? And the Lord smelled the sweet savor. And the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground, what? Any more for man's sake. For the imagination of man's heart is only evil from his youth, neither will I again smite any more every living thing as I has done. Now, I always read that as, okay, I'm not going to curse the earth with a flood anymore, until I read the next verse. Because here's what it says in verse 22. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night, shall not cease. It seems like when man sinned, it caused a disruption to the predictability of seasons and days and nights. It seems like that's what that's implying. Now, I don't know if it is. I'm not a Bible scholar, I'm just a Bible student. But when I read that, I'm like, wait, what happened? This is not, he said, I'm not going to do this anymore, which means he did it. And it seems like the inability to predict seed time. Can you imagine how hard it would be to plant if you didn't know when to plant and when it was going to come to harvest? So it seems like after the flood, God reinstituted the predictability of seasons and progression that we saw in Genesis chapter 1. Okay, anyway, that was a side rant. I wasn't planning on saying that, but I was there and I saw it. And I'm like, okay. Me and my goofy, curious mind. Y'all pray for me, because there goes another squirrel. Okay, got it. So we did progression through 24, and then 25, direction. And where do I get direction from in verses 14 and 15? It says, and God said, let them be for lights in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. What do we need light upon the earth for? So we can see where we're going. You ever tried walking somewhere in the dark? I don't even know where the ground is. You know what I'm saying? Right? I don't even know where the ground is. Right? And so he put lights for our direction so we can see. And that's one of the purpose. Like if we take a light and point it in a direction, God's word is a light unto my path, a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path. Okay. So the next one. So we got up to 25 so far. So let's go ahead and get the rest of these knocked out. Y'all want to do all the way to 37? Yes. We're almost there. Okay, so so we got 25, direction is 25, and then we see verses 16 through 19, we see position and beautification. Position, what does that mean? Everything is not equal, nor will it ever be equal. I forgot what verses those are. Position, okay, 16 through 19. So let's read 16 through 19, and we'll see position and beautification, 16 through 19. Here it is. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light. By the way, the lesser light wasn't darkness, it just wasn't as bright as the greater light. The greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. Both were essential. They were just not the same. God puts positions so there can be order. God created families, and when he created families, the father is supposed to be the head of the home. The wife is supposed to be the help of the home. A lot of people don't like that. Well, take it up with God. I didn't put it in my Bible. It was in there when I got up this morning. The children are the heritage of the home. That's how God set it up. We live in a world now where everything's out of order. Do you know the Bible says, woe unto that land whose king is a child? Guess what? Woe unto that home whose king is a child. Okay. Terrible twos. Only person terrible when my children were 2 was me. Sorry. I'm done. Okay. Ish. Let me, 16 through 19. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, lesser light to rule the night. And watch this. Here's the beautification. And God made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth. What's more beautiful than a sunset with the stars expanding across the sky and lighting it like the most beautiful artwork you've ever seen? And then it says in verse 18, to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good, and the evening and the morning were the fourth day. This is so good. I knew it was going to be good. I didn't know it was going to be this good. So I jumped all up in here. Verses 20 through 25, we see this beautiful concept called perturbation. Now I got to hurry because I got a challenge that starts in 13 minutes. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you all the rest of them, and then I'm going to read the rest of the chapter. We're going to do it like that, okay? Because that'll be easier. And I'm probably only going to go into great detail on perturbation because that's all I have time to go into great detail on. Great-ish detail. So 26 was position. 27 was beautification. 28 is perturbation. 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 I'm going to tell you what that is in a minute. Perturbation is verses 20 through 25. Multiplication is verses 22 through 23. I'm just going to give you the rest of them. Multiplication is 22. Multiplication, connection, domination, contribution, appreciation, consistent application, verses chapter 1, verses 5 through 31. The evening, morning, first day, evening, morning, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day. Okay. Consistent application. Completion, chapter 1, verse 31, and chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. Relaxation, Shabbat, Sabbath, chapter 2, verse 1 and 2. Restoration is also part of that, chapter 2, verse 2. So now I said all that. I'm going to read perturbation because it's so cool that God put perturbation in Genesis chapter 1, verses 20 through 25. I'm going to read that, and then I'll let y'all read the rest of it on your own. Here it is, verse 21 through 2. And God created... let me start with verse 20. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that it may fly upon the earth, in the open firmament of heaven. And God created the great whales and every living thing, and the creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and the fowl... let the fowl multiply upon the earth, and the evening and the morning were the fifth day. And then God said in verse 24, let the earth bring forth living creature bring forth living creature after his kind, cattle, creeping things, beast of the earth after his kind, and it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. So what do we see? What's perturbation? Perturbation is the byproduct of production. So I'm going to explain it as quickly and succinctly as I can. I can't believe I'm doing this. So plants don't reproduce like humans and like animals reproduce. Plants reproduce through a concept called pollination, okay, right? So pollen floats through the air and lands on another plant, and then it reproduces other plants. But the only way that pollen can move, it has no volition, it has no agency. So it has to be moved by something. And all perturbation. So here's why this is important: because trees, plant life takes in carbon dioxide and puts off oxygen. But humans and animals take in oxygen and put off carbon dioxide. So our breathing keeps the plants alive, and the plants existing and reproducing keeps us alive. But the plants don't have an intention of doing that. God just set it up so it automatically happens. So here are the things that contribute to perturbation. Wind. Did you know that every time a bird flies through the air, it affects the wind? Every time a butterfly flies through the air, it affects the wind. So everything is essential, okay? So perturbation, wind, water, animals, insects, and mechanical disruption. So if an animal chasing another animal through the forest rubs up against a plant, that plant's going to release pollen into the air, and that wind's going to carry that pollen to some other plants, and it's going to keep reproducing. God made the earth bring forth the land animals, and the water bring forth the fish and the fowl, and all of those things, even though they're not attempting to. Even God even made honeybees. And people don't like bees, and bees don't like people. Bees like honey. Bees are not trying to keep us alive so we can chase them around with a fly swatter and a Raid can. Bees are just going to get some nectar so they can make some honey. But when the bees are going to get the nectar so they can make the honey, they disturb the plants. And just by them being honeybees and going to get the thing that's in their own self-interest, the byproduct of their self-interest produces an ecology that keeps humans alive. Now, I'm going to end with this. God did not make us to be honeybees as people. But he did make us to be money bees. We are motivated by achievement. But while we're working on the things that we're working on that will make our lives better, the byproducts of the disruption that our activity creates opportunities for people all around us. When I was poor and I bought $500 cars, the car wash made no money off of me. The dealership made no money off of me. But when I buy a car that I pay more money for, where your treasure is there, where your heart be also, right? I'm going to take better care of that car than the car I spent $50 for. So now I'll have a mobile car wash come and wash one of my cars because it's not going through a car wash ever. And my other cars, like I have a membership at the car wash, and they're going to get money from me every month whether I get my car washed or not. And when a light comes on, I don't get my toolbox out in the garage and fix it in my driveway like I used to when I was broke. I take it to the dealership. So because I'm doing better in pursuit of things for myself, that pursuit of things for myself creates perturbation that makes people's lives better that I will never meet. This is the beauty of the 25, actually 37, productivity hacks in Genesis chapter 1. I hope this blesses you. Share it with friends, people that you love, and I'll look forward to seeing y'all on the next video.